here. I grew up in Nebraska in a small town, and I always wanted to be a lawyer. Even when I was a little kid, I kept having visions of myself exposing communists and helping poor people with justice concerns and that sort of thing. I think I watched every episode of Perry Mason. I saw me in that courtroom as the first lawyer in my family, and I was with my plan. I entered the University of Nebraska. I majored in history, English, and political science. I learned to read more effectively, study more effectively, and I applied and was accepted for law school. This was the height of the Vietnam War, and the draft guard that you see, the grad school deferment that went with it, that was pulled. So what to do? Get drafted? Not a good choice. I got into ROTC instead and served in the United States Army, knowing that I was going to Vietnam at some point. But this was my first gig at the Judge Advocate General School at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. The Vietnam War was going on and raging, and in December of '72, I had my orders to report for duty in Saigon. I did a few things and was able to get in the RIF, the reduction in force, that President Nixon had promised. I was released from active duty in April of '73, went back to Lincoln, joined a litigation firm, and I was living my dream until August of '77 when I was staring at a divorce petition. That was finalized a couple of months later. But just before Christmas, my ex-wife called and asked me if I would meet with a friend of hers, a new friend. I said, sure. She wanted to go to law school, that sort of thing. She came, we talked, and I told her she was nuts. We agreed to talk later. One of her two boys got chicken pox. She called to cancel. I said, I'll sit with the boys. I became her regular babysitter, and lo and behold, I fell in love with her and those boys. But just as an aside, I helped raise these guys, and when the youngest turned 21, the oldest was in Japan at the university in Kyoto, and they called to ask me if I would adopt them as adults. It was the best day of my life. Back to the time frame, here we are with 4 kids under 6 when we got married in '78. We went to lunch one time and bumped into an old friend of hers on that street corner in Lincoln, Nebraska. His name was Bob Harris. He worked for the Nebraska Bankers Association at that time, and we quickly became the very best of friends. In the spring of '79, Bob took on another task and suggested that I apply for his job, and I literally laughed out loud. But as he explained his advocacy role for community banks in particular, I was fascinated. I prayed a lot, and one morning I woke up and I knew it was the right thing to do. So I applied and they hired me. Yeah, that is me at that time. I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. I loved it, and I'm way behind right now. Anyway, my father-in-law died, and I had to leave to the NBA to go probate his estate, so I did that. In 1983, Bob Carey asked me if I would be his director of banking, and I was. I came in at a very odd time, but an industrial loan investment company had imploded, and that was probably one of the bigger news events of that year, and I was the receiver for Commonwealth Savings Company. Now, these folks were not very happy. They were told by the state, and they believed that their deposits were insured. They were not. And so I periodically met with them to try and calm them down. I also met with the people that were customers of banks that I had closed. They were not happy at all, and this is a cartoon that appeared in the Lincoln Journal. Those were very difficult meetings, as you may have figured out. I ended up closing about 20 banks or so, something like that, and this one that's shown here, we closed it because there were 3 bankers in there that were making bets on football games using the bank vault and its money. And if Nebraska had beaten Oklahoma that year, we would not have had to close the bank. Yeah, well, hell, you know, you hope that doesn't happen, but We helped impeach the Attorney General. That was fun. I sent others to prison. No, that was, oh, no, I won't tell you that. In 1985, I'd had enough, and so I went back to practicing law. And Bob had already moved to Oklahoma. In 1988, he moved to the Texas Bankers. His OBA job opened up, I applied, and they hired me, and here I am, almost 30 years later, with the highest privilege to work for the greatest industry and the greatest people in the world. Thank you for that opportunity.